In this video, I'm going to share with you guys a technique that I've never talked about on this channel. Now, if you were to ask me what the toughest times of year to consistently catch fish are, I'm talking early spring and late winter. These are the times when your water gets really clean, these fish are lethargic, and they don't necessarily really want to bite. So I like to downsize my presentations and give them a really natural option to feed. What we're going to be talking about in today's video is a small Marabou jig. Now you guys are going to say a Marabou jig is something I've talked about quite a bit on this channel, but never with the technique that I'm going to share with you in today's video. Now before we dive into the episode, I want to encourage you guys, if you're not already subscribed and enjoy bass fishing content, be sure to hit the subscribe button. I drop videos on a regular basis teaching you guys how to catch smallmouth and taking you guys on the water with me to go out and catch more fish. Now in today's video, it's my goal to walk you through everything you need to know about fishing a Marabou jig to be successful in cold, clear water. And I'm going to talk to you about this bait and ways to utilize it other than swimming at mid-column. I'm going to show you guys ways to utilize this bait to trigger bites from bass that are extremely lethargic, are overpressured, and don't really want to bite anything else. Let me tell you guys a story about how we figured this out. We were up in Traverse City fishing, and there were 4 boats on the same small lake. We knew this lake had giant fish, but everyone was kind of struggling. Well, I had given Durds a small hair jig earlier in the week, and he just happened to have it tied on. So he made a long cast, and then went down in the bottom of the boat to fool with something, and when he picked up on his rod, there was a 5-pounder swimming away with it. Let me explain that this lake was not easy. We knew there were big fish, but it was a very challenging lake. No other boat could even catch not a single fish. Ron and Durds put over 25 pounds in the boat on a small hair jig, fishing it in the way that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now before we dive into all the details about how to fish the bait, let's talk about the bait itself. The jig that I'm fishing is going to be the lightest possible weight that I can get away with while still maintaining or semi-maintaining bottom contact. We'll get into that with the how, but I like to fish anywhere from a 3/32 ounce hair jig up to a 3/16, and I'll only go to that 3/16 if it's windy and if I'm fishing 20 foot or deeper. Most of the time I'm fishing a 3/32 to about an 1/8 ounce hair jig. I want this bait to have a really natural action, a super slow fall, so the lightest possible head size that I can get away with to keep this bait close to or on bottom. Now the colors that I'm going to be throwing are predominantly black or brown. Most of the time I'm going to be fishing a black hair jig. The black hair jig has a lot more drawing power. It draws fish, especially in clean water, from a lot further distances. Its silhouette's better, and it looks like a lot of the bugs and leeches and nymphs that are in the water dying. But if I get on a bite where I know they're feeding on crawfish, that's when I'm going to switch up to the brown hair jig. So those are the 2 colors that I would recommend you guys picking up. And if you can only carry one, pick up the black in 3/32 or 1/8 of an ounce. Those are the most common sizes that I'm going to be throwing. If you guys want to pour and tie your own hair jigs, this is a Do It Molds Midwest Finesse Head, 3/32 of an ounce with a Victory 10-1-1-1 hook. It is, in my opinion, the best combination to pour and make your own Ned rig heads and hair jigs to go out and catch fish. But I'm going to have a link down there showing you guys how to pour, how to tie a jig, so that way you guys can save a little bit of money. I'm also going to have all the products linked down in the description below where you can check them out if you just want to purchase some. So when you take your hair jig, one of the biggest things is also having a little piece of plastic. Now this is a little piece of Berkeley hitworm, and you're going to thread this up onto the bait. That's going to give it a little bit more bulk in the water, because when this hair or this feather gets wet, it's going to want to cup really flat down. But it's also going to let you cast this bait a little bit further. In my opinion, having max scent also is important for the scent. I've seen where it makes a difference having max scent versus having other pieces of plastic, which is why I really like having a little piece of some sort of max scent threaded up on the hook. Weight and obviously the scent dispersion factor. Now as we start to talk about the gear, I'm going to be fishing on a long 7'6" rod. These are the 2 rods that I would recommend. The TFO 7'6" medium light tactical elite. This is a rod that I designed specifically for hair jig fishing, or the TFO professional 7'6" medium light. The professional is going to actually have a little bit more backbone, so it might be a better rod for this presentation because you're setting the hook in deep water with this bait on the bottom. But this rod, if you guys have a hair jig rod, the 7'6" medium light doubles as both like a springtime hair jig rod where you swim it through the column, and it can double as a rod that you guys can fish this hair jig down along bottom. It's also great for small swim baits. That's not what we're talking about in this video. Then I'm fishing with a large line capacity reel. This is a Fluger Supreme 30 size, 5:2 to 1 gear ratio. I go 8-pound test braided line to 6-pound test fluorocarbon. The kind of goal of this setup is to be super finesse, super light, make this bait look very natural so you trigger bites from fish that are lethargic and wary to bite anything else. Now that's the business end of the setup. That's the gear that I'm using. Now let's really get into how to fish this bait, because I think this is what differentiates this from all other baits and all other techniques when fish get really, really tough to catch. And when you start to look at this bait, it doesn't really look like much, and that is pretty much the goal of this technique. You want it to look unsuspecting in the water. So what you're going to do is make an extremely long cast. Make as long of a cast as you possibly can and let this bait fall on slack line. And like I mentioned, you're going to want the lightest bait for the slowest fall you can possibly get, and allow fish a lot of time to come over and look at it. A lot of baits that you fish at ½ ounce or plus sizes, especially in that cold water, are going to fall extremely fast through the water. You want this the exact opposite. Fall super, super slow and get down to bottom as slowly as possible. On a slack line, don't flip your bail. Once that bait is on bottom and you see your line going flat in the water, that's when you're going to flip your bail and slowly reel up your slack. Your goal with this technique is to almost dead stick this bait. Count to 10, 15, and then slowly turn your body and pull the bait. Pull it 3 to 6 inches. You want to move it very short distances. It's super cold water. The bait fish are inactive. The crawdads are inactive. Everything in the water is moving really slowly, so that should be your thought process when you're fishing this technique back to the boat. So you pull it 3 to 6 inches, dead stick it. Pull it 3 to 6 inches, dead stick it. You don't want this bait to have a crazy erratic action. You don't want to be shaking the rod or popping the bait. You also want to fish a really light head, so anytime you move this bait, it sort of glides along the bottom. If you fish a super heavy head, it's going to want to dig in and have a lot of contact with bottom. You don't necessarily need that with this presentation. You want it to kind of glide along the bottom, look like a nymph, look like a small crawdad, not really doing anything down there on the bottom. You want this bait to have natural action. So that a light head with the really slow movements are going to cause this to kind of glide and scoot along the bottom, as opposed to your standard jumps and hops and shakes and everything else that you do with the bait. And that's going to trigger fish to bite. That super slow movement, that super slow cadence, and letting that bait soak in the water where fish can come up to it. They're going to be curious as they come over and watch it sink. They're going to come up to it nose down and look at it. And I've seen it with live scope where they come over to the bait and just sit on it. And as it moves, they get more and more curious. And about 10 inches into the bait, moving along the bottom, 20, 30, 45 seconds, they'll eventually come over, get curious, get hungry, want to see what it is. And they don't have hands, so they have to pick it up with their mouth. And that's when you're going to catch these fish. And we've caught a lot of giant fish. I'm talking 10 plus fish over 6 pounds, a bunch of countless 5-pounders. This is a big fish technique because it is super unsuspecting. This is a technique that catches giant fish. So I would encourage you guys to please try this technique. It is ultra slow, it's ultra finesse. It can be a challenge to go out there and use this patience to your advantage, but it will catch you a lot of giant fish, especially when you know fish are in an area. This is not a bait that you're going to cover water with. You're not going to burn down a bank and go have success fishing this bait because you're never going to cover enough water and you're not going to be fishing it slowly enough. Where you're using this technique is on areas that you know fish are living. And for me, in cold water situations, that's last living vegetation. That could be a small patch of grass that you know is still left, that's still green, that's still holding bass. It could be a hard spot next to a big flat that comes out into the lake. It could be a long extended point with a little shell bar off the end. Anywhere that you have a small sweet spot and you know where that is, you can fish this technique through there and trigger fish to bite that won't bite anything else. This to me is a technique that is a spot scrubber. This is a technique that really maximizes the location, maximizes the number of bites that you're going to get somewhere. And if you know fish are living there, but you can't get them to fire on anything else, this is a technique you can pick up and get fish to bite. Now to finish this video up, I'm going to talk about my theory on why this technique is so effective in cold water. You have a bunch of different skirting materials and hairs and fibers that you can tie on the back of your jigs and on the back of your small Ned heads. But in my opinion, the reason that Marabou is such an effective feather that you can utilize is twofold. One, when this gets wet, it gets very compact. It's a very narrow, slender, small profile. But because it is a natural fiber, because it came from something living, and because it obviously has so much movement, you're going to get a natural lifelike action down underwater. I really believe there's something to having a natural compound or a natural material that is more effective in especially ultra finesse presentations than compounds such as silicone or living rubber. That is my opinion why this bait is so successful. Obviously it's a small profile, obviously it's very natural presentation, super small bait, but because this used to be living, because this is a natural fiber found in nature, this is something that just has natural action in the environment and causes fish to eat. Now, that may be crazy, but this is a technique that I know catches big fish, and I would encourage you guys to pick up some hair jigs, go out to your home body of water, and when things get tough, pick one up, tie it on, and fish this thing as slowly as you possibly can through your most high percentage areas, and I'd be curious to know if you guys have the successes that we've found on our bodies of water. If you guys want to check out a video where you actually catch fish on that little hair jig, click this video right here. If you guys aren't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to learn about any of the products that I used or talked about in today's video, they'll be linked down in the description below. Take care, tight lines, God bless, pursue your passion.